2030.
2030.
Saudi Arabia, the public investment fund,
It's a
there's a
big
lot of
vision.
excitement
This
around
transformational
NEOM specifically.
change, every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural,
The
religious.
2030.
2030.
2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla, 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 yalla.
This is the 2030, episode 43. Dr. Hanaa, I'm Moabed. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you as always.
A lot
What's
is
up?
But things are good. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to be busy. Yeah, good. I'm very good. Dude, the weather here in Riyadh, I was just thinking about this today. Went to Bujeri Terrace this morning with the fam, and it's like one of those like days where it's like 65 to 70 and just like bright sunshine, not a cloud in the sky. And it's just, the air is so crisp and like fresh. And it was just so relaxing. Been working my tail off here. And so it's like nice to have like a moment to just sit down and indulge on a very caloric brunch. And it was just love. And the weather here is just awesome. So everything's good.
Just to convert for the non-Fahrenheit users on the show, that's like 18 to like 20, right? 22? Yes.
Do you know America is like one of like
one.
5 countries that uses Fahrenheit, and the rest of the world, that's so stupid. I mean, but like, how do you phase that in? That's like a 10-year thing for Americans to be like, listen, Fahrenheit is out, Celsius is in,
It'd be great.
metric system in.
So I can feel them because my mom always used Fahrenheit and my dad uses Celsius. So my mom will be like, oh, it's 50. And so I kind of know what that feels like and so I don't know, but I've gotten worse at it since moving away from where my mom lives and living in a country that uses Celsius. So it's, Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just helping. I'm helping the listeners understand what the temperature feels like.
Yeah, when I say
Exactly.
70, I don't mean like July 70. I mean US 70 here. Yes. And it's just absolutely miserable back on my farm in St. Michael's, and everything's frozen over, and I'm just so happy to be here. And we've got some really good feedback on our conversation last week with Rada on the Riyadh Metro. This is from Fahad. Bro, I would love to see you riding the Riyadh Metro, LOL, but that was a really interesting conversation you had with Gada. I ride the Metro now. I'm a Metro rider, like not just for, inspection purposes, but I've actually used it to skip traffic twice now in Riyadh, especially on the blue line. So I fit right in according to the memes that were shared. But it's quite convenient, and it really is so smooth and fast. And it was really crowded the last time I used it a few days ago. Hannah was like packed, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, this is really taken off. So thanks for that feedback. Thanks for all feedback. We've got a great show this week. This week, we're going to be talking a little bit about, I'll do a deep dive on the recent news of STC becoming licensed, STC Bank being licensed in Saudi Arabia, the first all-digital bank in Saudi Arabia to get licensed, and talk a little bit about that journey of getting there and the ecosystem in general. And we'll get into some news and just hang out, what we do every week here. So it should be good. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to us wherever you're listening to this or watching it. It doesn't matter to us. Just subscribe so that it comes to you instead of having you have to find us, which would be great. So, yeah. How's the weather in London
cold
right now? I mean, what's
it's
it
really
like there?
cold today. This morning it was like 3. Yesterday it was like 3. What's that, like 35? I don't know. It's cold.
That's the worst. That's like, it's not cold enough for snow, but like then I'm sure it's raining, or like it's always raining in London. But it's like, okay, like you can't do anything with that. You can't go outside. You can't ski.
At the moment it's 8, so it's 46. So it's not so, warmed up. It's kind of rainy today. So like I got an email from my kids' school, and they're not going to their normal like grass field where they play soccer. They're going to the AstroTurf one. Like that's the kind of season it is in London.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear it, but I will be seeing you quite soon. In just a few weeks, we'll be doing some live interviews here in Riyadh, which we were stoked about. That is also the date of my birthday, so let's not work too hard on those. But we are looking forward to that, and we will have more conversations coming up in the coming episodes. Just the boys, just us today, a boy and girl, but just us today. And then I think next week we will start our interview marathon, you might call it. So stay tuned for that. Let's get to a deep dive.
Let's get to a deep dive.
Okay, so this was actually a news item we were going to do this week, and then kind of looking into it, realized it was a little bit of a bigger story when you kind of piece it all together. But I want to talk a little bit about the progress of the banking sector in Saudi Arabia and how Saudi Arabia is thinking about and approaching the digitalization of the banking sector, particularly in retail banking here and customer-facing aspects of financial services here in Saudi Arabia. So again, this was prompted by a news item that you shared recently. SAMA, the Saudi Central Bank, which was formerly called the Saudi Arabian Monetary Agency, where it got that acronym, gave the green light to a digital bank in Saudi Arabia, STC Bank, to start operations in the kingdom. The news really caps a journey of startup success in the sector for STC Bank in just a few years. It takes us back to 2017. This is when I was like, I think I'm going to go a little deeper into this because this is super interesting. STC Bank was originally founded by the Arabian Internet and Communications Services Company, aka Solutions. I kind of want that as a logo. That's actually a really cool company name. It initially established this company, which eventually became STC Bank, with 100 million riyals, which is $25 million in capital. The ownership was then sold to STC, which is Saudi Arabia's leading telecom company. I mean, like my phone is STC, in 2019, with capital then increased to 400 million riyals by the end of the year, like 125 million or whatever. So 2020 comes 3 years after the launch. The company was licensed as an e-wallet provider by SAMA, and STC Pay is used everywhere. I mean, I see it everywhere. I see everybody using it. It then raised money in the form of an equity sale to the financial giant Western Union in 2020 as well. Sold off 15% of the company for $200 million. So we're off to a great start here, guys. At this point, the bank is doing really well. It's growing exponentially just a few years, and they decided to move fully into the digital banking space. But that requires close coordination and supervision of SAMA, which works really hard to ensure consumer protection in Saudi Arabia. And we're going to come to that in a second. By 2021, the company was granted a digital banking services license with capital of 2.5 billion riyals. A total of 1.5 billion riyals was deposited in a restricted account with SAMA pending final approval. So some things take some time. Great things take a lot of time to build. 3 years later, April 2024, last year, SAMA granted STC an experimental launch permit for STC Bank, which was the penultimate step toward full market entry, if all goes well, if nothing breaks. And apparently it did. So here we are, January 2025, and we have a final green light by the Saudi Central Bank, SAMA, to commence its operations in the kingdom. So the new STC digital-only bank will offer Sharia-compliant services and features approved by its Sharia committee, including diverse local and international payment options and banking solutions, it says. So this is a really story that reveals to me a lot about what's happening in Saudi Arabia in general, really, but in the banking and finance sector specifically. Saudi Arabia has moved quite quickly on the digitalization front, and we've talked about it a lot on the show, right? Digital services, e-government, and so on. Many of these are world-leading services and widely used in Saudi Arabia. Everybody's using them. So while the kingdom has sort of like stormed ahead in digitalization elsewhere, it has definitely taken a more cautious and more patient approach with digital banking. Case in point, STC Bank. It's the first digital bank in Saudi Arabia, but it certainly will not be the only player, and actually isn't right now. That's why this is such a significant milestone. In a way, you can say really that STC Bank's journey and SAMA's careful and patient supervision of it was a pioneer for others in this new space in Saudi Arabia in 2025. It's a significant step, really, in SAMA's efforts to accelerate digital transformation and enhance competitiveness in the banking sector. It's a significant step, right? But it's taken some time. And banking, unlike other digital services, is quite complicated. It involves other people's money, and a rushed approach to this can have significant drawbacks for customers, for the bank, for the economy as a whole. So netting it out, I think what we see is that Saudi Arabia is comfortable in leading digitalization and adopting digital services in some sectors, but at least in banking, it sees more value in being patient and careful, prioritizing safety and security of the assets of its citizens and residents over rushing these things out. So STC Bank is the first digital bank in the kingdom, first fully digital bank in the kingdom, I should say. But there are two other players who were granted licenses by SAMA recently as well. D360 Bank, a PIF company, was also granted approval by SAMA last month, and Vision Bank is also in the space. So you see like what's happening here, right? I mean, the banking sector is transforming, evolving. It's doing so at its own pace for the benefit of stability and consumer protection. And, you know, this is a start, right? But this is not the end. There are more areas for the kingdom's banking sector to open up, especially on the retail side, For example, foreigners still require an iqama to open a bank account or get a mortgage, meaning you have to have a residency permit. And I think if Saudi Arabia is going to become the world's next Switzerland, and I hear that a lot here, and I believe that, I think that that's sort of the trajectory they're on. You have to continue to make these changes to compete with nations like that. I think, again, we're on the road there, and sort of speed bumps or stopping points on that road are, truly competing in this space globally with everybody else. And these are areas that are likely coming. But again, I mean, the kingdom would rather do things patiently, I think, at their own pace when it comes to banking and finance. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So yeah, I mean, I got into this and I thought it was super cool that they were sort of like the pioneer, right? And so this was the first time really that the SAMA was working on this exact type of project, this, company. And so I think a lot of lessons were learned not just by STC and new competitors, but also by SAMA officials who said, okay, we're doing this for the first time. We're going to take our time. We're going to do it the right way. And so I think it's a really cool story. Congrats to STC Bank, Saudis that are, going to have a new banking option. And now if you're a rival in this space or you're entering the market, it may be easier for you. May not take as long. I don't know. But just an interesting story and kind of a huge moment that is like I said, it's like a news item, and then you kind of get into it and you're like, well, this is actually represents a big milestone in the space in Saudi Arabia. So
Thank you so much for actually turning it into a deep dive. And as I was writing it, I was thinking there's so much more to this piece of news than just the fact that, STC gets the license to basically practice as a digital bank. I think there's like 3 or 4 things that really you need to think about when thinking about kind of moving into digital banking in Saudi. And I think one of the most important ones is the young population. So I think we've mentioned this many times before, but the majority of the population is, 60% under 30 is what we say normally. And so youth are definitely moving into that space. I mean, I see most young people pull out Monzo and Revolut cards here all the time when they're paying for things, or I see them, that's what the card on their phone is when they're paying, because those digital banks are just so much easier for young people to open. And just to think about going to a bank and talking to a human to open an account and getting a checkbook, like that's what I did when I opened my first bank account. That's not what these young people are expecting. And so I think the age of the majority of Saudis is really important. I think the second one you mentioned, which is having an international community there that want a quick solution, being able to pay in local currency, have their, be able to transfer their currency online instead of having to go somewhere. That's something of the past as well. And I also think that there's been a lot of talk about financial literacy in general within the kingdom. And so having digital banks was going to open up that conversation just a little bit more. Like, what is banking for anyways? Is it for saving? Is it for spending? Is it for converting currency? Is it for sharing expenses? Is it for pooling resources? And all of those things are not necessarily taught in schools anywhere in the world, let alone in the normal classroom within Saudi. And so I do think it's important to have these tools at our disposal where people can start thinking a little bit more about managing finances and what that means for their careers, for the longevity of their assets and their investments, if they're even thinking about doing that, which they should be. So I love that this is happening. It's happening within a very regulated space, because maybe the last point that I want to bring up that I think is really important to talk about is it's important to see where money is coming from and where it's going. And it's especially important for that to happen within the region, considering historical events that were related to where money was going and who was being supported. So I think that having the regulations it's just like, it's a no-brainer, and actually you wouldn't have been able to do this without that, because it's really important to have that transparency. So really cool and very exciting news for sure.
Your last point was a point that I was going to make as well. I mean, you have to have that, and it's just like a tortoise and the hare thing. As long as the end destination is what it is, there's no rush. You don't need to be first in this space. There are a lot of drawbacks with digital first banks that can happen and that can be very consequential for those that are banking with that institution or the bank itself or the economy as a whole, you got to do it the right way. It's the hare approach, it's the tortoise approach, not the hare approach. I think the hare approach would be in the United States of America, where digital banks are everywhere and there's a lot of risk with that, right? I mean, it's a huge thing to manage. And so, yeah, and there's so much about traditional banks that I think it just are so stupid. Like I 2 or 3 years ago, something like that, I got a really large check. I'm not rich, but I got a large check and I was like, oh, cool. And then like the mobile deposit for the bank limit was like well underneath the actual check size. And I was like, okay, but you're a digital bank. Like what happens now? And I couldn't figure out how to deposit this check. They're like, well, take a picture of it. It was a huge process. And I was like, well, okay. But like if you had a local branch, right, you just take it over there, walk out with a suitcase of money, which I would not have done, of course. But there's things like that where you're like, we don't need to have these inconveniences. And digital first banks have a lot of upside, right? I mean, it's like on your phone. It's so quick. It's very easy to sign up. But those also can be challenges, right? In the context of the last thing that you said, right? This is an area that for a long time pre-Vision was struggling with where money is coming in and where it's going out. And the United States was all over Saudi Arabia about this, because if you don't have regulation and control over those things, then it's really hard for us to tell our citizens to bank with you, to do business with you, because you just don't know, right? And so I think even a little bit before Vision, but definitely around the Vision, things started getting cashless here very quickly. And now I like never see cash. I have some cash, and I like got it at the beginning of coming here in like early January, and I was like, I'll get a little cash. And I have not found a way to spend it or use it. Everything is a digital payment, tap the card, tap the phone, etc. It's awesome, by the way. And actually we've talked about this before, but the sort of iPhone payment approach in the United States is just really not caught on like it has here. It's amazing. So yeah, I mean, really great points, Dr. Hanaa. Nothing much to add on top of them, but yeah. And so you'll see more competitors in the space entering. You'll see more international recognition of the fact that this is now a milestone that's been hit. So you'll see foreign players considering this as an option, especially foreign digital first banks. So big moment. And I'm glad you agree that it should have been a deep dive and not a news item. Thank you. Let's get to the news.
Thank you so much. Let's get to the news. So let's get to the news. I actually don't know this place. Have you ever been to Nice One online? www.niceone.com.
No.
Well, anyway.
No. Should I be
don't
going
know.
there?
It depends on how you shop for your beauty supplies. But basically, Nice One, which is a beauty and e-commerce company, has just listed on the Saudi Stock Exchange, which is in line with, we've talked about this quite a bit on this show. It's part of the ongoing boom in IPO activity across multiple industries in Saudi. And it raised an impressive $322 million. And stock prices actually soared by 30% in its first trading day, which is the maximum that's allowed by the Saudi Stock Exchange. The company's rapid rise is spurred by increasing popularity of online retail in the kingdom as a whole. And it just highlights shifting consumer behavior from going to brick and mortar and buying things online, particularly among young Saudis, as we just mentioned with digital banking specifically. So Nice One is an online beauty retailer, kind of like Sephora, but online. So beauty products, hair products, skin care, hair care, like hair tools, whatever, things like that. And it serves just as a testament to the kingdom's strategic push to really diversify its economy away from oil dependency and build up other sectors such as technology, digital services, and retail.
Nice one, Dr. Hanaa. Nice one. Nice news item. No, I'm an in-person brick and mortar Sephora guy for sure. So I've not heard of this, but it does highlight that. I mean, this story is really about the IPO, and indeed, like, incredible run of oversubscribed IPOs on the Saudi market. It's like twice a month we hear something about that. It's an IPO boom, and you mentioned it. And yet, for some reason, that's just not translating to the overall market performance at all. In the last 36 months, 3 years really, the market is actually down a little bit from its highest point in, the last 5 years in 2022. And the highs have not been that high. We're talking 3 years of generally between the 11,000 and 4,000 range on the Tadawul. So we have all these IPOs coming online, and this huge IPO boom, but the market is not really reflecting a wider boom. In 2024, there were 42 new listings on the Saudi market, raising $4.1 billion. That's the highest in the region. 14 IPOs on the main market, 28 IPOs on the Nomu.
Yeah, well
Did
done.
I say it right that time? I think that was the last, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. But this is all good. This is great. You want these IPOs coming in, you want them oversubscribed. It's just not doing enough to pull the rest of the market up with it. So the question really is like, what's in store for 2025? We're going to see this IPO run continue. It looks like that. We're off to a good start with a nice one. And maybe that can help pull the market out of its overall kind of stagnation in the last few years. In comparison, in the US, S&P up 88% over the last 5 years, Dow Jones up 58% over the last 5 years. Like other markets are doing well, and that's not about IPOs. Those are about blue chip tech stocks that are just bringing everything up. We did talk recently about the CMA actions to kind of open up the market more for foreign investors. That may have some impact. We're going to see, but you do have a really good run of IPOs, and it's great for the sort of medium-sized companies that are going to IPO, medium to large, to like IPO and go large. So this is good news for the company, good news for the shareholders, definitely really good news for the people that bought on the IPO and saw 30% returns in one day. But you got to see that translate to the wider market. So we'll see. Next news item, Dr. Hanaa. I'm sure you're not on the run and not being sought by this organization because you have a sterling reputation. But but Interpol, the international police, I think that's like the hybrid, right? The name is opening a regional office in Saudi Arabia. The move has been in the works since 2016 and comes at a time when the kingdom is expanding its role in global security affairs. Interpol said in a press release on Thursday of this week, the creation of a new Interpol regional bureau for North Africa and the Middle East, MENA, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has taken an important step forward. The office will collaborate with national and regional entities, including the Arab Interior Ministers Council, GCC Pol, and the Naif Arab University for Security Studies. It signals to Western allies and international partners that Riyadh is committed to combating crime, terrorism, and cracking down on organized crime networks, both here in the region and in Saudi Arabia, an important step. Good collab for Saudi Arabia to be hosting Interpol with a regional office. I think very good for the security situation in Saudi Arabia and the region as a whole.
I'm really happy to hear that there is a regional headquarters for Interpol, and I love that Riyadh is stepping up to be that player within the region. I think it's really important for them to be part of the security community in that sense.
Yeah, so take that, Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Doha. It's coming to Riyadh.
Very cool.
Very cool.
So we were talking about your art collection last time, and I think that I'm just going to stick with that theme a little bit and talk about a very exciting new exhibition that just opened in Jeddah, the Islamic Arts Biennale 2025, which is the second edition of the Arts Biennale. It's titled and All That Is In Between, which is pretty cool. So it's organized by the Dir'iyya Biennale Foundation, and it takes place in a really cool old building in the old Hajj terminal of the King Abdulaziz International Airport. So it's kind of an iconic space where people from around the world used to basically come as their first stop as they're on their way to Hajj, to the pilgrimage in Mecca. So this exhibition is going to run until the 25th of May of 2025, and it explores the different ways that faith is experienced and practiced and expressed and celebrated throughout the Islamic world. So it's not just Saudi and Mecca. It's really thinking about contributions from different institutions that look at Islamic art everywhere in the world, all over Europe, Denmark, Greece, Italy, Portugal, as well as parts of the Middle East. So you also have Kuwait, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi, and other countries, Spain, UK, US, Uzbekistan, Vatican City, Indonesia. It's led by artistic directors Julian Rabi, Amin Jafar, and Abdurrahman Azam, alongside Saudi artist Mohamed Shono. as curator of contemporary art. It represents over 500 objects across 5 exhibition halls, so it's pretty big. And the notable international institutions that are lending works include the Louvre, the Victoria and Albert Museum here in London, and the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. I've only heard good things from everybody that went the first time around. I've seen some of my friends who are working on this, celebrating the opening and the different exhibitions. So kudos to them. Congratulations to everybody that's been part of this. It's a really fantastic thing. I missed the first one, so I am hoping that I can find a time to come and see this exhibition before the end of May.
Very awesome. And again, we had Dina Amin on the show somewhat recently, and it's just really cool that everything that's happening in this ecosystem here is just fabulous. As you know, Dr. Hanaa, art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life. And of course, that is why I truly love art. And I think there's so much to see just here in Riyadh and in Jeddah now and in the Eastern Province, all over the place. People are being creative and putting that creativity to the canvas, to digital spaces, on the side of walls. It's amazing. And so it just is a really, really cool thing. And I think that people there are going to really enjoy this and what's happening there. Rounding the news section out, and just kind of bear with me here, Dr. Hanaa, but this is one that was reshared like 1 billion times, at least in my feed. So definitely not news to Saudis at this point, but something that is my American brothers and sisters are going to like. The famous movie score composer Hans Zimmer is set to put his stylistic touches on the Saudi national anthem, and I cannot wait to hear it. And like a lot of my friends were sending to me, they were like, oh my God, please be true. And I think this is indeed not fake news at all. I think this is true. The chairman of the Saudi General Entertainment Authority, GEA, Turki al-Sheikh, revealed on Sunday of this week that he held a meeting with the world-renowned composer. There's a photo from the meeting, which you can see right now. Hans is like sitting at the piano. Turki al-Sheikh is standing up. It's pretty cool. The two discussed, quote, several ambitious projects aimed at enriching the kingdom's cultural landscape. One such project is the rearrangement of the Saudi national anthem using a variety of musical instruments, a move that could bring a fresh and innovative interpretation to the national melody. And, as I started looking at this news item, I was like, okay, actually, you know what? Let's see if we can get AI to generate this for us. And I tried several AI LLMs, and none of them could do it except for one. And then I had to download special software to play it. And then I played it, and I was like, nope, you completely missed the mark. It was like a single piano. I was like, listen, let's just let Hans work his magic here. Another proposal involves Zimmer composing an original piece called Arabia. Inspired by Saudi Arabia's heritage and culture, the piece would serve as a musical tribute to the kingdom and could resonate globally as a symbol of the nation's artistic ambitions. The meeting also explored the idea of a large-scale musical concert, sounds awesome, with a groundbreaking concept to be hosted as part of Riyadh season in the coming years. Zimmer was in town to give a sellout musical performance as part of Riyadh season. I would say that maybe outside John Williams, he's the most famous and celebrated film score composer of all time. I mean, Crimson Tide, Days of Thunder, Pearl Harbor, Pirates of the Caribbean, Interstellar, Lion King. We don't have enough time. 153 film and TV projects that he's worked on. My absolute favorite of his works, and it's really not even close. And top 3 movie of all time, The Rock. It's such an amazing, terrific movie, and it just does not get old. It's so good. I've seen it 1,000 times. The music really makes that movie. It's absolutely epic. So, yeah, this is so cool. And I was going to try to create, as I noted, an AI version of this song to give us a taste, and I can't do it. So I was going to drop that in here, but we can't. We're just going to have to wait for this magical collab to happen. And Saudi Arabia is a great national anthem, by the way. So it doesn't need to be elevated with the Hans Zimmer treatment, but I'm very excited to hear that nonetheless.
It's super interesting. I saw this news last week and I didn't include it because I was thinking, oh, maybe we'll just talk about it when he's done. I can't imagine what it might sound like. It's a short national anthem, so we all know it really well, and it's something we used to sing loads when we were kids. And there's a little bit of an improvisation that happens at the end of it that most Saudis do. That would be interesting to see. Has he talked to the stakeholders? Is he talking to school kids that sing this every day and play around with it? I just wonder, I feel like there needs to be a little bit of an anthropological study that's done before you just recompose something that is so incredibly ingrained and deeply rooted within society. But let's see. I'm excited to see where it goes.
So you raise a really good point, which is like, what if he completely misses the mark in doing this? Like, there's got to be, I mean, His Excellency Turki al-Sheikh, he's got to have a couple people take a listen to this first, because if he just botches it, and I don't think there's a good chance of that, but because he's so epic. I want to hear it, but you're right. I bet this is not like an easy task, right? I mean, to like remake any national anthem with your signature style, even if you're a legendary German film scorer like Hans Zimmer, you got to put a little thought into it. You can't just like bust out the strings and just make it into an action movie. There's got to be some research. I bet he does it, right? He's going to be here a bunch. He was here recently. Sounds like he's coming back for some epic concerts. Sold out concerts, by the way, as part of Riyadh season. So much going on with Riyadh season. Open up the WeBook app today. I was like, wow, there's so much happening in like just the next 5 days. You recently had like world drone racing, and I was like, I missed that. You know, you got to be looking at the WeBook app to see it all. But I also missed Hans Zimmer live and in color from Riyadh. But just a cool story. I can't wait to hear it. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to play us out here with the Saudi national anthem to put a bow on episode 43. Dr. Hanaa Al-Moaibid from London. Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
سارعي للمجد والعلياء مجدي لخالق السماء وارفع الخفاق أخضر يحمل النور المسطر رددي الله أكبر يا موطني موطني قد عشت فخر المسلمين عاش الملك للعلم والوطن سارعي للمجد والعلياء مجدي لخالق السماء وارفع الخفاق أخضر يحمل النور المسطر رددي الله أكبر يا موطني موطني قد عشت فخر المسلمين عاش الملك للعلم